Well, hello. Welcome to the War Room. Now, sometimes it happens that our course designers make little changes and don't quite follow through on implementing them. You can see the effects of this in our module overview this week. At some point in the past, the reading list for this course was modified, and someone overlooked similarly modifying the course overview. So if you look at it, it clearly refers to a specific work by Emerson, which we are not reading, and it also refers to Thoreau as though you have a text of his at hand. We don't. It's not a major malfunction, and I've suggested that this be addressed, but it has been deemed as insignificant for spot revision, so we're just living with it for the moment. Even though it does allude to works that you're not reading, which would be optimal, the overview does get us on target for talking about the concept of conflict, or more specifically, war, as a feature of American history, culture, and literature. The nugget I like best from the overview is where it posits the inclusion of conflict as a necessary element of plot, and also the continued persistence of conflict in our views of exactly how the world works, basically. The suggestion here is a weighty one. What I take from this is that when we encounter conflict in a novel, whether it's Starbuck against Ahab in Moby Dick, Frederick Henry against the entire military institution in the Western world in A Farewell to Arms, or Sethe against the ghost of her lost child in Beloved, we embrace the opposition we see as a core representation of reality, of what it is to live as a human. While we recognize these instances as fiction, our experience tells us that such conflict is a matter of who we are innately. We can take this back to Aristotle and his thoughts on how emotive involvement between audience and fiction works. Without the conflict, there's no emotion, no catharsis, and that makes the fiction pointless. Now, that all makes a lot of sense, but it only follows the logic of conflict in one direction. It supposes that we have inclinations towards conflict, which are then represented in our literature. But what if we only have inclinations towards conflict because we've been enculturated by media, which teaches us to value it in a certain way? This idea is explicit in some of the most prominent texts dealing with war. In Stephen Crane's The Red Badge of Courage, often referred to as the greatest war novel in American literature, Henry Fleming, the main character, reflects back on his desire to enlist and fight in the war. And he recalls that inspiration. Crane writes, "He had despaired of witnessing a Greek-like struggle." Now, this is to say that Fleming, who we have to remember is a 19th century farm boy from upstate New York, has spent his youth idolizing Homer and his epic, his epics of warfare, that basically this kid from the middle of podunk nowhere in the US in, 170 years ago, has been reading Homer and thinking, I need to go out and do that. That's what real manhood is about, all right? So without that inspiration of Homer, does Fleming choose to listen to his mother who tells him to stay home? Does he never arrive at Chancellorsville? Now, that may seem far-fetched, but I can extend this to my own personal experience. The other day, I was commenting to an old friend that a huge part of my own inspiration for joining the Air Force when I was young were the dramatic scenes of the B-52 crew and Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove. Now, we laughed, but it's still true, is the thing. And I think that all leads us to Emerson, and him coming into the mix this week, I think works really well. As a transcendentalist, he's committed to a world of acceptance, a world where we understand conflict as a kind of illusion, because the parts which seem in opposition are really contributors to a holistic process. For Emerson, what it takes is for us to be aware, to be conscious and to employ our rational thought to break the patterns of conflict, which may have made sense once when people were scarcely more than animals, but which we now have the power to reach past. I don't know if you find that convincing, but for our purposes, I adore how it captures what we might call the ultimate foil to the cult of conflict, and that is idealism. Now, both idealism and conflict have much to say about who we are as Americans, so I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this. Besides discussing war and conflict in our literary samples, your additional assignment this week is to put some research into possible publication venues for your milestone project. Now, I'm very glad we're doing this because, after all, the sharing of knowledge is what academic writing is about. So you're asked to do some research on journals which might be suitable for publishing the article you're writing for me. You're to write an abstract for your article, such as you might send to an editor, and you're to write an overview describing why you picked your particular journal, justifying, excuse me, justifying why it's a good fit for your paper. Let me just say, actual publication is within the reach of any of you, so don't rule that out. Now, that's about it for now. I'll talk to you again. If you have questions, if you need to check up on anything, if, you know, the usual deal, let me know and I'll get back with you. All right. Till next time, I'll just say adios.